Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So welcome to Green Seattle Partnership's second ever environmental workshop. Today we'll be learning all about water. We are so excited you are here. If you haven't seen the little note at the bottom of the screen yet, please rename yourself to include your first name and pronouns if you feel comfortable. And you can do this just by hovering over your video with your mouse. And then 3 little dots should pop up in the right-hand corner. You can click those and you should be able to rename yourself. If not, no worries. Okay, and we're just gonna go over some Zoom etiquette. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, but there's the chat feature. Feel free to use this for responding to questions. You can mute and unmute yourself. Please remain muted unless you're speaking or unless maybe you're in a small group and your small group leader says it's okay for everyone to be unmuted. Like I just mentioned, go ahead and rename yourself to add your pronouns and your first name. And if you feel comfortable, we would love to see your faces. So go ahead and turn on your video. Okay, and these are just a few of our community guidelines, some of the norms we've laid out, so I'll just read them really quickly. The idea of step forward and step back, so make sure not to take up too much talking space in a conversation, but definitely still share your ideas. We want to hear what you have to say. Come with an open mind, debate the idea, not the person, differentiate between opinion and informed knowledge, notice personal discomfort as an opportunity for growth, be willing to challenge yourself, make mistakes, and learn from them. None of us are perfect. We are not experts. And of course, have fun. That's why you're here. We hope you have fun and learn something new. And this is just an outline of what our introduction is going to look like. So we're going to have a land acknowledgement. We're going to tell you a little bit about what Green Seattle Partnership is. We're going to introduce ourselves, who are the people leading this, and then we're going to have a quick little icebreaker. So let's prepare ourselves for the land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded land of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Okay, now a little bit about what Green Seattle Partnership is. So we're a collaboration between the City of Seattle, Forterra, community groups, nonprofit volunteers, and many more partners. And GSP works to maintain and restore parkland to create a sustainable network throughout Seattle. And we work to keep Seattle green through lots of restoration projects and just keeping our parks nice and healthy.
So we are the Green Seattle Partnership Youth Ambassadors, and we made these workshops. Are still students in high school, and we're passionate about environmental issues just like you all, especially the preservation and restoration of our forests and green spaces, so GSP's mission. And during these workshops, we hope to inspire you all to be good stewards and advocates for the environment, while also sharing your knowledge and educate others on how they can do the same. So now we're going to do some introductions and icebreakers. So the youth ambassadors will introduce ourselves first, and Meredith can start us off.
Okay, hi, my name is Meredith. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior at Seattle Prep, and my favorite aquatic animal is probably a sea otter.
Hi, my name is Sydney. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a senior at Seattle Academy, and my favorite aquatic animal is probably going to be a narwhal.
I'm Margot. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior at Ingram, and I also love sea otters.
My name is Ava. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior at Seattle Prep. And my favorite aquatic animal is probably a river otter.
My name is Maya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a senior at Seattle Prep, and my favorite aquatic animal is a dolphin.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm a senior at Ingram High School. I use she, her pronouns, and my favorite aquatic animal would be an orca.
All right, so now that you know all of us, we're going to get an opportunity to know some of you. And we're going to use a poll everywhere. I'll send the link in the chat, and it's just answering a question to what is your favorite aquatic animal. You can also text the number on the slide, but I will send that link now. Oh, we have some interesting animals coming in. Oh, wow. Awesome, lots of orcas. These are some great aquatic animals, lots of these in the Puget Sound. All right, thank you for sharing your favorite aquatic animals. And I think now we're going to transition to a review of the water topic.
Yeah, so let's just do a quick little refresher of some of the content we sent out a week ago. Next slide, please. All right, so why is water important? Well, clean water is essential to human health, sanitation, and agricultural practices, as well as the well-being of plants and wildlife. But unfortunately, many areas are facing water scarcity because of water overuse, which is why water conservation is so important. Now, as you might know, the water cycle naturally moves water around through things like rain and evaporation, but we humans are depleting our resources of accessible fresh water faster than they can be replaced. One thing that's important to note is that agriculture accounts for 92% of our water consumption. So if we can reduce the use of water in that industry, it can help greatly with our overall water conservation. And some farmers are already taking steps to develop new irrigation techniques and grow less water intensive crops. But some things that you can do as an individual to help with water conservation are to eat less water intensive crops, reduce your food waste, or go vegetarian. Next slide, please. Water's facing another threat too, pollution. So industrial waste, temperature increases, deforestation, pesticides, stormwater runoff, plastic, and more can all pollute water and endanger marine plants and animals, as well as land-dwelling creatures. We also want to note that water pollution disproportionately affects communities of color, and 46% of all the toxic areas in Washington state are in communities with large populations of people of color. For example, the Duwamish River, which is contaminated with chemicals from industrial waste, sewer overflows, and storm drains. And due to the toxicity of the river, the fish within it are also contaminated. But some of the communities that live near the river still have to fish there because they either need the food or the income. So just food for thought. Next slide, please. We also want to kind of dive into two kinds of pollution, one being plastic pollution and the other being stormwater runoff. So let's start with the plastic pollution. So as you might know, large plastic pieces threaten marine wildlife. I'm sure you've probably seen those viral images of birds with their stomachs full of plastic bags. But microplastics also present a large threat to our marine wildlife as well. So microplastics are created when pieces of plastic break down into tiny pieces that are less than 5 millimeters large. They can even be as small as microscopic. These microplastics can then be ingested by marine life, where early studies have indicated that they can cause organ damage, leach chemicals, and perhaps even inhibit fish reproduction. And so while there's still a lot that we don't know about microplastics, early research has shown that it can and will endanger marine wildlife. And so something you can do to help with this issue is to reduce your use of plastic and also make sure that the plastic you do use is properly disposed of, or if you see any litter in the streets, make sure that goes into the trash can or wherever it needs to go. The other issue I wanted to dive into was that of stormwater pollution, which is particularly relevant in Seattle. Because in Seattle, stormwater runoff is threatening our salmon populations because the stormwater runoff contains chemicals and toxins that negatively affect the health of salmon. Scientists have found that stormwater runoff slows and kills salmon before they can lay their eggs, thereby decreasing our salmon populations. It can also cause health issues in salmon, like heart problems and pericardial issues. However, there is something that we can do. Filtering stormwater runoff through soil can remove many of the toxins that threaten marine wildlife. In studies, when scientists placed fish in water that had been filtered by soil, they survived and they didn't have the same negative health effects as the fish that had been placed in stormwater runoff. And that kind of goes back to the point why it's important to have green spaces like parks in urban areas like Seattle, because soil there can filter water instead of just having impervious surfaces like sidewalks and streets that will only help wash toxic chemicals into our urban creeks and streams. All right, next slide. That's pretty much it.
Okay, so now we're going to break up into some smaller breakout rooms for some discussion. There's going to be 2 youth ambassadors in each group. So once you get your invite for your breakout room, just feel free to join.
So we're just going to have a big discussion now with everyone. And each in your small groups, you should have designated someone to kind of share the highlights or a key point from your discussion. So I can call on someone, or you guys can just unmute and get started. So does someone want to go first?
Well, our group talked about how, like, even though there's a lot of like individual things that you can do to like help conserve water, or like more eco-friendly options to like plastic bottles and things like that, there's also like we have to consider holding like big companies and like agriculture industries accountable for things like that. And someone in our group said something about how even though like we might not be able to like fix all of that, we definitely like have power with what products we buy and things like that, and like making companies have more eco-friendly solutions to like recycling or wastewater and things like that.
In my group, we talked a lot about like stormwater runoff and how that's like an important issue, especially in like Seattle, because we have so much like marine life around. And also we brought up how it's like hilly, so everything kind of runs down like back into the oceans and stuff like that. And then we also like briefly touched on like sanitation issues in like other places mostly, where it's not that there's like not a lot of water there, but there's not a lot of water that's like usable because it's not safe to drink or to use. And yeah.
In my group, we talked about both of those things as well. We also talked about like the history of like pollution and stuff, and how in Seattle like they used to dump pollution like straight into Lake Washington, and how like these things have been going on for so long, and now we're kind of finally starting to realize that, or at least people are addressing it. And also we spoke a lot about how these issues really disproportionately affect Black, Indigenous people of color, especially as seen with the Duwamish, and also about like air pollution and food scarcity and all those things as well.
Those are all really, really good points that you all brought up. And I hope you guys had some really good discussions. And now we're going to move on to some things that you can do.
Alrighty, so there are many ways that you can support water conservation efforts, but we've compiled just a few of them that you can think of taking into your own lives. And so one way that you can reduce the amount of water that you consume is through reducing the amount of like foods that you eat that require a lot of water to produce. And so foods such as red meat and shelled nuts and eggs require a lot of water to produce. Secondly, also reducing food waste. In the US, we waste about 40% of our total food supply, which also wastes 25% of our fresh water consumed annually. So by wasting less food, you can drastically reduce the amount of water as well as other resources that are go into producing that food. Thirdly, you can also support efforts to clean up the Duwamish River by writing to local elected officials and also learn about the organizations doing this important work in the area. And lastly, if you're curious about more ways to conserve water and also just learn about ways that our water systems are polluted or just generally learn more about water, we are going to be sending out all of these links and more later today and in a couple of weeks with ways you can get more involved. Next slide. Awesome. So this is the second of 4 workshops that we are going to be putting on. And so if you liked this workshop and you're interested in coming to some more, we have a workshop on carbon on October 10th. And we also have a panel of climate experts, scientists, and other organizations who are doing important work around this. And so if you have any questions that come up from either discussion or you think of them randomly, you can communicate through the chat right now, or we can also through our Instagram, which is Green Seattle Partnership, or just replying to the emails later. If you have any questions, let us know. So that registration link will be added into the chat, and we will also share that in our emails later. And also feel free to share these workshops with anyone you think might be interested, with your communities, with your environmental clubs, your friends. We would love to have more people. So thank you all for doing that. Next slide. And lastly, we would love your feedback on this workshop. And so we're going to send out a short survey, and it takes about 5 minutes to fill out, so it's pretty quick, but it's really important to hear from you. So it helps us for the next time we run these workshops, and it also helps us gain and like anonymous demographic questions that better help us understand the identities and backgrounds of our audience. So thank you in advance for your work and your help as we are working to make our workshops more equitable and inclusive. Next slide. And finally, that is the end of our workshop. Thank you so much for coming today. It was amazing to see all of you taking the time to learn about these important issues on a weekend. So we recognize that taking the time out of your day. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
If you have any questions, put them in the chat.